Yes, this is the correct video.
How do we know we understand anything about our society, ourselves, or anything else? Well, isn't that the purpose of psychology, obviously, right? According to APA, psychology is, well, the study of the mind and behavior which embraces all aspects of human experience. But what is human experience? How do we know that? Well, we know what people feel like. Well, obviously we could extract brain waves out of sensors attached to someone's head with a brain-computer interface. Well, we aren't talking about those. You see, psychologists from the 1940s, 50s, or 60s, they don't have computers to their disposal, meaning they have to find it out empirically, or through observing and analyzing observations.
One eternity later.
Anyways, the commonality of considered to be valid psychological tests include, but are not limited to, standardization, meaning that procedures are kept consistent, objectivity, meaning that subjective judgment barely affects anything, and discrimination, meaning that outliers of a group is removed from the data set for the sake of the general trend. Tests are repeatedly conducted and statistical methods are employed to assess whether a test is reliable enough to be valid for publication. So all the papers depicting a psychological test must be as consistent as we think. Right? Or are they? You see, I'm not the only person asking this question. All of these people also did, spanning 125 institutions, which are probably more than you can name, including Harvard, MIT, and Stanford. Together, they make up the Open Science Collaboration. So what did they do? Well, their experiment is to take existing experiments and redo them themselves. From 2011, they furnished a procedure for choosing and replicating studies, where each team picks between published findings in reputable psychology journals such as the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Learning, Memory, and Cognition, unless it is deemed not reputable due to, for example, the study being based on a historical event. Each team then tries to exactly copy their procedures from a 15-page procedure itself on how to replicate procedures, in which they will also consult the original authors when needed regarding experimental design, and the teams put in data together to see whether if the conclusions still hold. So what are the conclusions of this so-called experiment? Well, I think you know what I'm doing with it. Let's just look at this graph. Yeah, whereas most, if not all, of the original experiments are statistically significant under the alpha equals 0.05 criteria, only less than 50% of the replications did. This is the first graph. There's also another graph that shows pretty much the same thing, whereas barely any studies in the original sections are red, meaning not significant. Look at how this section is, how big it is in the replications section on the right. Yeah, I was surprised when I first saw it too. So what did they prove? Well, not anything other than to disprove a misunderstanding of what credibility is. Yeah, so to sum the findings up in one sentence, just because a replication is successful doesn't mean it can be causally explained. And just because it is not successfully replicated does not mean it is causationally false. We must be skeptical. In the words of the original researchers, whatever one may be out of all of them, they say, the scientific process is not ideological. Science does not always provide comfort for what we wish to be. It confronts us with what is, and that is the reality of science. So in short, the strength of the study is that it correctly disproves a myth regarding how reliability should be interpreted in experimental psychology. The weaknesses are more or less the same thing. It did not prove how reliability should be understood, even if it debunked a misunderstanding. Since we still don't know how to prove anything psychologically through experimental procedures. Do I know anything I'm talking about? Well, maybe, maybe not. Anyways, here's all the sources cited. All of them. Yeah. You can look them up for yourselves if you think you understand the material better than me or will be. Anyways, yeah. Here.
Now this is the page except in full screen in case you need a clear look, and if you want to stop and copy it, you can pause the video, although I don't know why you would need to pause it since it's the end of the video. Also, of course, the citation is the APA because it's a reference. Get it?